My parents pranked me on Christmas by giving away all my presents, so I left and never came back. My parents love pranking their kids. All 5 of us have been traumatized by their schemes. I've told them repeatedly these aren't pranks, they're harmful experiences that damage mental health. They never listen. I turned 18 this year. Got valedictorian. My parents asked for my Christmas list, promising they wanted to reward my hard work. Mom swore no pranks this time. I was skeptical but wanted to believe they were finally proud of me. I asked for one thing, a $40 book I couldn't find anywhere, not even the library. Christmas Day, huge family party. My boyfriend was there. When present time came, everyone was barely holding back laughter as they insisted I go first. My brother's gift, a MacBook box. I thanked him profusely. Open it first, he laughed. Inside, chocolates. I'm allergic to chocolate, which he knows. He'd given the actual MacBook to his wife. The box was the prank. My parents' gift, the book I wanted, except it was a dictionary with a fake cover. They'd given my actual book to my younger sister because she wanted to read it more. Every and single gift was fake. Empty AirPods box, zero balance gift cards, Monopoly money in an envelope. Meanwhile, I'd spent everything I'd saved getting them real, thoughtful presents. I sat quietly while everyone else opened their actual gifts, gushing about how perfect they were. Dad asked why I wasn't praising my gifts. What gifts? I don't have any gifts. He exploded, calling me ungrateful, saying it was just a harmless prank. I snapped. You don't even know what pranks are. You promised me. You played with my self-esteem for a laugh. You've shown me I can never trust you. They called me entitled for ruining Christmas. I ran upstairs, packed everything essential, asked my boyfriend if I could stay with him. As we left, my family tried physically blocking me, demanding I apologize for spoiling their mood. The hypocrisy. My boyfriend took me to his parents' house instead. They welcomed me warmly, gave me a real dinner, real presents, including the book I'd wanted. When we got to his apartment, I completely broke down. I'd been shown my value to my family, less than a joke. I blocked them all. 2 weeks later, they're calling me a spoiled brat on social media, saying I'm doing this for attention and money. My brother harasses my boyfriend in public. They posted that I'm having a tantrum and will come to my senses. I called my mother one last time. You don't care about me. You only want me back so you have someone to prank. You gave away my presents to make me watch others be happy while I suffered. I'm done. Find someone else to be your entertainment. She started apologizing frantically, then slipped. We can wait for your apology when you come to your senses. Still expecting me to apologize, still lying, still manipulating. I hung up and blocked them forever. But here's what they don't know yet. My boyfriend proposed last night. His family is throwing us an engagement party next week. My future in-laws are already calling me daughter. They've shown me more love in 2 weeks than my biological family did in 18 years. My parents are about to learn from social media that not only am I never coming back, but I'm building a real family with people who actually love me. They'll see the photos, the joy, the real presents, the real love. They wanted a prank? Here's mine. They lost their daughter forever over a $40 book. And unlike their pranks, this one's permanent. The engagement announcement goes live tomorrow. Let's see who's laughing then. I woke up with sunlight cutting through the blinds, and my first thought was checking if the ring was still there. It was. Silver band, small diamond, sitting on my left hand like proof that last night actually happened. My boyfriend was still asleep next to me, breathing steady and calm, and I just stared at the ring for probably 5 minutes straight. Part of me felt this huge wave of happiness, like my chest might explode from it. The other part felt sick to my stomach with guilt, because my family was out there somewhere posting lies about me, and I was here getting engaged like their cruelty didn't matter. My phone sat on the nightstand buzzing every few seconds. I grabbed it and saw 63 notifications. Most were from my family's social media posts, my relatives commenting on their lies, strangers who didn't know me taking their side. I didn't open a single one. I just turned the phone face down and decided that today I was choosing happiness over their poison. They could scream into the void all they wanted. I wasn't listening anymore. My boyfriend woke up around 9 and found me still staring at the ring. He kissed my forehead and asked if I was okay, and I told him I was scared and happy at the same time, which didn't make sense but was true. He got up and started making breakfast while I sat at the tiny kitchen table watching him crack eggs into a pan. We talked about the engagement announcement going live that afternoon, and I realized my hands were shaking so bad I had to sit on them. Part of me still feared their reaction even though I knew I was doing the right thing. What if they showed up here? What if they tried to ruin this too? My boyfriend noticed me spiraling and came over, took my hands in his, held them steady against the table. He said their anger proved I was finally putting myself first, which was exactly what they couldn't stand. They needed me to be small and grateful and easy to hurt. Me being happy without them destroyed their whole narrative. We spent the morning working on the engagement photo and announcement text. We took like 40 pictures before finding one we both liked. Simple photo, both of us smiling, my ring visible but not showy. The announcement text was harder. I kept wanting to explain why I left, defend myself against their lies, but my boyfriend reminded me that our joy didn't need justification. We kept it simple and positive. Just announced we were engaged, thanked people for their support, said we were excited for our future together. No mention of my family situation, no drama, just happiness. His parents came over around noon to see the final version before it posted. His mother looked at the photo and started crying happy tears, then hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. She said she was so proud of me, so happy to call me daughter. I almost cried too because this was what parental pride actually looked like. Not mockery disguised as jokes, not fake gifts designed to humiliate, just genuine love and support without conditions attached. The announcement went live at 2 p.m. I hit post and immediately wanted to throw my phone across the room. Within minutes, the comments flooded in with congratulations from his family and friends. People I'd never met saying they were happy for us, that we made a beautiful couple, wishing us all the best. I watched my phone nervously, refreshing every few seconds, waiting for the inevitable explosion from my biological family. It felt like standing on a beach watching a tsunami form on the horizon. You know it's coming. You can see it building. But you can't do anything except wait for impact. 20 minutes after posting, my mother created a public response post. I saw the notification pop up and my stomach dropped. She claimed I was having a mental breakdown and making rash decisions to hurt them. Said I was confused and angry and not thinking clearly. That my boyfriend's family was taking advantage of my emotional state. My father added comments about how I was throwing away my family for attention, how I'd regret this when I came to my senses. My brother shared the whole thing with his own cruel commentary about me being manipulated by my boyfriend, how I was too stupid to see I was used. They made me sound crazy, unstable, like I was the problem instead of them. My younger sister sent me a private message 30 minutes later. It was surprisingly kind, which caught me off guard. She said she was happy for me, but scared of what our parents would do to her now that I was gone. They were already asking her questions about whether she knew where I was, if I'd contacted her, what I'd said. She was terrified of becoming their new target. I felt guilty for leaving her behind, this crushing weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. But I also knew I couldn't save her until I saved myself first. You can't rescue someone from a burning building when you're still on fire. I sent her resources for teen support hotlines, websites for kids dealing with abusive families, told her to save money secretly, and make a plan for when she turned 18. I promised I'd help her when that time came. It wasn't enough, but it was all I could offer right now. Viviana Novikov commented on my engagement post an hour after it went live. I hadn't talked to her since graduation, but we'd been friends in high school before I started pulling away from everyone. She wrote this long public comment defending me and calling out my family's abusive behavior. Said she'd always known something was wrong with how they treated me, that she'd seen the signs but didn't know how to help. She was proud I finally got out and wished me nothing but happiness. Then she messaged me privately saying basically the same thing but more personal, that she remembered all the times I'd show up to the school looking exhausted or upset and make excuses. How my family always made mean jokes about me in front of my friends. She'd wanted to say something back then but didn't know if it was her place. Now she was saying it. My family was cruel, and I deserved better. My boyfriend's extended family rallied around us online over the next few hours. His aunts and uncles and cousins flooded the comments with support, drowning out my biological family's attacks. Every hateful comment from my relatives got buried under 10 positive ones from his. His Aunt Letitia started planning the engagement party immediately, messaging me to ask what foods I liked and what colors made me happy. She treated my preferences like they actually mattered, like my opinion was important. She asked about allergies, dietary restrictions, favorite desserts. Made me feel included instead of like an afterthought. I kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when she'd reveal this was all a joke. But it never came. That evening, Viviana came over with her father Stanislav. She'd told him about my situation and he wanted to help. He was a lawyer who specialized in family law, and he sat down with me and my boyfriend to explain options for getting a restraining order if my brother's harassment got worse. He didn't charge us anything, just offered his help because he thought what my family did was wrong. He treated me with this gentle respect that made me realize how abnormal my family's cruelty actually was. Normal parents don't humiliate their kids for fun. Normal siblings don't harass their sister's boyfriend in public. Normal families don't turn love into a weapon. Stanislav explained the legal process, what evidence we'd need, how to document any future harassment. He gave us his card and told us to call any time if we needed help. Said he had a daughter my age and couldn't imagine treating her the way my parents treated me. I had my first therapy appointment the next morning with a counselor who specialized in family trauma. My boyfriend's mother had helped me find her and set up the appointment. I walked into her office feeling like I might throw up from nerves. She was older, probably 50, with kind eyes and a calm voice. She asked me to tell her what brought me in, and I started explaining the Christmas incident. I made it through maybe 2 minutes before I started crying. Then I couldn't stop. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe right, couldn't get words out. She just sat there and waited, didn't rush me or tell me to calm down. When I finally got the whole story out, she said something that made everything crack open inside my chest. She said what happened wasn't a prank, but deliberate emotional abuse designed to break me down. That my family had systematically destroyed my self-worth for years using humiliation disguised as humor. That leaving was the healthiest thing I could have done. Hearing a professional say that, someone trained to understand these things, made me realize I wasn't crazy or oversensitive or ungrateful. I was a survivor of abuse. And I'd just taken the first step toward healing. 3 days after the engagement announcement went live, my boyfriend came home from work looking shaken. His hands were trembling when he put his keys on the counter. I asked what happened, and he told me my brother had shown up in the parking lot at his job. Just appeared out of nowhere while my boyfriend was walking to his car after his shift. My brother started yelling loud enough that people in the building could hear through the windows. Called my boyfriend a predator who stole me away from my family. Said he was manipulating me and turning me against everyone who loved me. My boyfriend's coworkers came outside when they heard the shouting. His boss stood in the doorway watching the whole thing. My brother kept screaming about how my boyfriend had brainwashed an 18-year-old girl and isolated her from her family. He was making a scene on purpose, trying to make my boyfriend look like some kind of monster in front of his coworkers. Security from the building next door came over and told my brother to leave. He finally got in his car, but not before shouting that this wasn't over. My boyfriend's boss pulled him aside after and told him he needed to file a police report. Said this was harassment and it happened on company property where other employees witnessed it. His boss was worried about safety and liability. We called Stanislav that afternoon and he met us at the police station 2 hours later. The officer who took our report was this older guy with gray hair who looked tired. He wrote down everything my boyfriend said about the parking lot incident. Asked if there had been other harassment. We told him about the social media posts, the messages, the previous confrontations. Stanislav had printed out screenshots of everything my family had posted online. The threats, the attacks, the lies they were spreading. The officer looked through all of it and nodded like he'd seen this before. He said families who lose control over someone often escalate their behavior. That we should document every single contact attempt from here on out. Every message, every phone call, every time they showed up somewhere. He said if the harassment continued, we'd have enough evidence for a restraining order. Filing that police report felt weird. Empowering because someone official was finally taking this seriously and documenting that my family was dangerous. But also scary because I was officially saying my own family was a threat, making it real and permanent in a way that couldn't be undone. The officer gave us a case number and told us to call immediately if anyone from my family contacted us again. Stanislav walked us out to the parking lot after. He said we did the right thing and that documentation was our best protection. That abusive families rely on their victims being too scared or guilty to involve authorities. By filing the report, we were taking away their power. That week, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer because I figured it was another family member calling from someone else's phone. But something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was my maternal grandfather, Rainer. I hadn't talked to him in months, maybe longer. He started by saying he was sorry. Sorry for not protecting me from his daughter's cruelty all these years. He said he'd been enabling her behavior out of what he called misplaced loyalty. That watching her attack me publicly on social media finally opened his eyes to how bad things had gotten. I didn't know what to say. His apology felt like it came 30 years too late. Where was he when I was a kid getting pranked until I cried? Where was he every Christmas when my parents humiliated me in front of everyone? I told him I appreciated the call, but I didn't know if I could trust it. He said he understood, that he'd failed me as a grandfather, and he wanted to make it right somehow. He asked if there was anything he could do to help me build my new life. I said I didn't know, and I needed time to think. We hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone, feeling confused and angry and sad all at once. Rainer called back 3 days later. This time he had a specific offer. He wanted to pay for my college tuition as an apology. Said he had money saved and nothing would make him happier than investing it in my education. I felt torn in half. Part of me wanted to refuse out of pride. I didn't want anything from anyone in my biological family. Didn't want to owe them or give them any claim over my future. But the practical part of me knew I needed help. College was expensive and I was starting from nothing. I told him I needed to talk to my therapist about it. He said to take all the time I needed. My therapist and I spent a whole session talking through the offer. She helped me understand that accepting support wasn't weakness. That if Rainer genuinely wanted to make amends, letting him contribute to my future was actually fair. He'd stood by and watched his daughter abuse me for years. The least he could do was help me recover from it. She also helped me see that I could accept his help with clear boundaries. I didn't have to let him back into my life emotionally just because he paid for school. I could take the practical support while keeping my distance. I called Rainer back and told him I'd accept his offer, but with conditions. He couldn't use the money to control me or demand access to my life. He couldn't tell my mother or anyone else in the family about helping me. And if he violated my boundaries even once, the deal was off. He agreed to everything without arguing. Said he just wanted to help and expected nothing in return. The next weekend, my boyfriend's cousin Callista took me shopping for engagement party clothes. I'd met her at family dinners and she was always nice, but this was the first time we hung out alone. She drove us to the mall and we walked through department stores looking at dresses. I kept gravitating toward plain, boring clothes in neutral colors. Things that wouldn't draw attention. Callista kept pulling out brighter options and holding them up to me. She'd say things like, "This color would look amazing with your skin tone," or "This style would really suit you." We went into a dressing room with a pile of options. I tried on this navy blue dress that Callista had picked out. It fit perfectly and actually looked good. I stared at myself in the mirror and suddenly couldn't breathe. My chest got tight and my vision went blurry. I was having a panic attack right there in the dressing room because I realized I was allowed to pick something I actually liked. My whole life, choosing things I wanted had been dangerous. My preferences were ammunition for pranks and mockery. Asking for what I liked meant setting myself up for disappointment. Callista heard me struggling to breathe and came into the dressing room. She didn't freak out or make it weird, just sat down on the floor next to me and stayed there until I could breathe normally again. She didn't ask a bunch of questions or make me explain. When I finally calmed down, she helped me find a dress that made me feel beautiful instead of invisible. A deep green one that I actually loved. She never once made me feel broken or crazy for having a panic attack over a dress. Back at the apartment, Letitia called to talk about engagement party plans. She wanted to know what kind of food I liked, what colors made me happy, if I had any allergies or dietary restrictions. She asked about music preferences and whether I wanted the party indoors or outdoors. Every single question was about what I wanted, what would make me comfortable, what would make me happy. She kept checking if I was okay with her suggestions. The party was scheduled for 2 weeks after the announcement. She involved me in every decision, asked if I wanted to invite anyone from my side, and I said just Viviana and Stanislav. She said that was perfect, and she'd make sure they felt welcomed. I kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when she'd reveal this was all a setup for some elaborate humiliation, that the party planning was just another prank and everyone would laugh at me for believing it was real. But that moment never came. She just kept being genuinely kind and treating my opinions like they mattered. Slowly, I started believing this kindness might actually be real. That not every nice gesture was hiding a cruel punchline. My paternal Aunt Heidi sent me a long message that same week. It showed up in my message requests on social media since I'd already blocked most of my family. She wrote paragraphs about how I was destroying the family and should be ashamed for airing private business publicly. Said I was being selfish and dramatic. That every family has problems and I was making a mountain out of a molehill. She said I should apologize to my parents and come home before I ruined relationships that could never be repaired. That I was breaking my mother's heart and my father's spirit. I read the whole thing and felt nothing. Just this blank emptiness where guilt and shame used to live. I blocked her without responding. My therapist had been teaching me that not every attack deserves my energy. That some people are so deep in the toxic system they can't see the truth even when it's right in front of them. Heidi had watched my parents torment me for years and never said a word. Now she was mad because I finally fought back. I didn't owe her an explanation or a response. Stanislav helped me start the process of getting my important documents from my parents' house. I needed my birth certificate, social security card, medical records, and other paperwork to enroll in college and handle adult responsibilities. He explained my legal rights as an 18-year-old adult. My parents had no right to keep my documents from me. We drafted a formal letter requesting the documents and giving them 10 days to comply. If they refused, we'd involve the police and potentially take legal action. Stanislav made everything sound simple and straightforward, like this was just basic legal procedure and not me going to war with my own parents. The letter was professional and cold. No emotions, no accusations, just a clear demand for my property with a deadline. We sent it certified mail so they couldn't claim they never received it. Stanislav said we'd wait out the 10 days and see how they responded. He seemed confident they'd either comply or dig themselves deeper into legal trouble. My parents responded to the legal letter exactly how I expected. Not by sending my documents, but by posting on social media. They claimed I was brainwashed by my boyfriend's family and threatened to sue for defamation. Said I was spreading lies about them and destroying their reputation. That they'd given me everything and I was repaying them with betrayal and false accusations. They tagged me in the post even though I'd blocked them, so their friends could see it. Stanislav actually laughed when I showed him the post. He said they had no legal grounds for a defamation suit. That truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and everything I'd said about them was documented fact. He explained that their desperation to maintain control was showing. That threatening legal action they couldn't follow through on meant they were running out of options. He said this was actually good for us because it showed their true nature to anyone still defending them. We were winning, he told me. Not in a way that felt good, but in a way that mattered. I applied to 3 local universities with Rayner's promised tuition support backing me up. I focused on programs that started in the fall semester, giving me a few months to get settled. My high school transcripts were strong since I'd been valedictorian. I wrote application essays about overcoming adversity without going into specific details about my family. The applications asked about my goals, and I wrote about wanting to help other people escape toxic situations. About understanding trauma from the inside, and wanting to use that knowledge to make a difference. All 3 schools accepted me within 2 weeks. I got the acceptance emails and just stared at my laptop screen, not quite believing it was real. I had options. Real choices about my future that nobody could take away or turn into a joke. Choosing where to go felt massive, like the first real decision I'd ever made for myself. Not what my parents wanted, not what would avoid punishment, just what I actually wanted for my own life. I picked the school with the best psychology program and the most resources for students. Submitted my enrollment confirmation and paid the deposit with money from my coffee shop job. It was official. I was going to college in the fall and nobody in my biological family had any say in it. My younger sister called me 3 nights after I submitted my enrollment confirmation. Her number flashed on my screen at 11 p.m. and I almost didn't answer because I was scared of what she'd say. But I picked up and heard her crying so hard she couldn't form words at first. I waited while she gasped and hiccuped and finally choked out that Mom and Dad were taking everything out on her now that I was gone. They pranked her constantly, worse than before, like they needed someone to torture and she was the only target left. She asked if she could come stay with me, and I felt my chest crack open because I wanted to save her, but I was barely keeping myself together. I told her about the teen crisis hotline again, wrote down the number slowly so she could copy it. I promised I'd help her the day she turned 18, that we'd have a plan ready and she could escape just like I did. But right now, I had to focus on my own healing, or I'd drown trying to rescue her. She cried harder and said she understood, but I could hear the betrayal in her voice. I hung up and stared at the wall for an hour, feeling like the worst sister alive. The week before the engagement party, a message request popped up on my social media from an account I didn't recognize. The profile had no photo and only 3 friends, and the name was just random letters and numbers. I opened it and saw paragraphs about how my mother was dying of cancer and wanted to see me one last time before it was too late. The messages begged me to come home, said Mom was too proud to reach out directly, but she was wasting away thinking about our broken relationship. I felt sick reading it, that familiar pull of guilt and obligation trying to drag me back. But something felt wrong about the timing and the desperation. I took screenshots and brought them to my next therapy session 2 days later. My therapist looked at the messages and asked me questions about my mother's health history and whether anyone else in the family had mentioned cancer. I realized nobody had said anything, not even in their angry social media posts calling me ungrateful. My therapist explained this was a classic manipulation tactic called hoovering, where abusers fake emergencies to pull their victims back into contact. We blocked the account together during the session while she watched, and she reminded me that real medical emergencies get communicated through proper channels, not through fake anonymous accounts. I felt stupid for almost falling for it, but also relieved that I'd learned to question instead of just obeying. Ted showed up at our apartment the following Saturday with a leather folder and a laptop. He was my boyfriend's uncle, a financial advisor who'd offered to help us plan for our future. He sat at our kitchen table and opened spreadsheets that showed different budget categories and explained how to track income and expenses. He taught me about building credit by getting a secured card and paying it off every month. He showed me compound interest calculations and retirement accounts and all these practical life skills my parents never bothered sharing. They'd kept me ignorant on purpose, I realized, so I'd always need them and never feel capable of surviving alone. Ted treated me like a smart adult who could understand complex concepts, asked my opinion on financial goals, and praised my questions instead of mocking them. He spent 3 hours with us and never once made me feel stupid or childish. When he left, I sat with my boyfriend and admitted how much my family's constant mockery had damaged my confidence in my own intelligence. I'd been valedictorian but still felt dumb because they'd convinced me my achievements didn't matter. I applied for a job at the coffee shop 2 blocks from campus the next Monday. The manager interviewed me right there, asked about my availability and whether I had customer service experience. I admitted I'd never had a real job before, and she smiled and said everyone starts somewhere. She hired me on the spot and scheduled my training shifts for that week. Learning to work the espresso machine and memorize drink orders felt overwhelming at first, but my manager was patient and kind while teaching me. She corrected my mistakes gently and celebrated when I got things right. Making my own money felt powerful in a way I didn't expect, like I was proving I could survive without my family's resources or approval. My first paycheck was only $200, but I stared at it like it was $1 million because I'd earned it myself. Every shift I worked was evidence that I was capable and independent and didn't need them. 3 days before the engagement party, building security called our apartment at 7 in the evening. The guard said my father and brother were in the lobby demanding to see me and refusing to leave. My boyfriend pulled up the security camera feed on his phone, and we watched them yelling and gesturing at the guard. My father's face was red, and my brother kept pointing at the elevator like he was going to force his way up. The guard stayed calm and professional, explaining they weren't on the approved visitor list and needed to leave the property. My brother shoved the desk, and my father started threatening legal action. We watched the guard pick up his phone and call the police while keeping his body between them and the elevator. My boyfriend added the security footage to our documentation file, the growing collection of evidence showing my family's harassment pattern. We stayed safely inside our apartment while the situation played out 4 floors below. The police arrived within 10 minutes, and I watched from our window as 2 officers approached my father and brother in the parking lot. The officers talked to them for several minutes while my father gestured wildly, and my brother crossed his arms looking furious. One officer walked over to the security guard and took notes while the guard explained what happened. Then both officers returned to my father and brother, and I could see them delivering some kind of warning. The officers pointed at their patrol car and then at my father and brother, making it clear they were serious. My father's shoulders slumped and my brother kicked at the ground, but they both walked to their car and drove away. The security guard called our apartment and explained the police had warned them about harassment and trespassing. One more incident would result in arrests. Instead of feeling guilty like I used to, I felt relieved that someone with authority was finally protecting me from them. They couldn't just show up and intimidate me anymore. There were consequences now. My therapy session the next day focused on managing the guilt I felt about the engagement party. I kept thinking about my sister at home suffering while I celebrated, and it made me want to cancel everything. My therapist asked me directly if my healing caused my sister's pain or if my parents' abuse caused it. I knew the answer, but saying it out loud was hard. She explained that I couldn't set myself on fire to keep others warm, that sacrificing my own recovery wouldn't save my sister. The best thing I could do was heal myself and be strong enough to help her when she was ready to leave. She reminded me that my parents had choices and they chose cruelty, that their behavior wasn't my responsibility to fix. I left the session feeling less guilty but still sad, understanding that some situations don't have solutions that make everyone okay. Sometimes you just have to save yourself first. The night before the engagement party, I had nightmares about my family crashing it and ruining everything. I dreamed they showed up and started pranking all the guests, turning the whole celebration into a joke at my expense. I dreamed my boyfriend's family laughed along with them and I was alone again with nowhere to go. I woke up crying into my boyfriend's shoulder at 3 in the morning, my heart racing and my hands shaking. He held me and reminded me that his entire family would be there protecting us, that security knew not to let my parents in, that I wasn't alone anymore. He stroked my hair and told me about all the people who loved me and wanted to celebrate our engagement. His voice was steady and calm, and eventually I fell back asleep feeling safer than I ever did in my childhood home. When I woke up again at 8, sunlight was coming through the window and my boyfriend was still holding me. The engagement party day arrived and Callista and Letitia showed up at 9 to help me get ready. They brought makeup and hair supplies and turned our bathroom into a preparation station. Callista did my hair while Letitia picked out my dress and jewelry, both of them chatting and laughing like this was the most fun they'd had in weeks. They shared funny family stories about my boyfriend as a kid, including me in their world so naturally that I almost forgot I hadn't known them my whole life. Letitia told me about the time my boyfriend tried to run away at age 6 and made it to the end of the driveway before getting scared. Callista described how he used to hide vegetables in his pockets at dinner and feed them to the dog. They treated the preparation like a celebration instead of a chore, making me feel beautiful and wanted instead of invisible and mocked. The party was beautiful, held in my boyfriend's parents' backyard with string lights and flowers and a table full of food that people actually wanted me to enjoy. White and yellow lights hung between the trees and created this warm glow as the sun started setting. Tables covered in real cloth had centerpieces made of roses and baby's breath. The food table stretched along the back fence with pasta and salads and fruits and desserts, all of it real and meant for eating instead of some cruel joke. Extended family members arrived and hugged me warmly, introducing themselves and asking about my plans for college. My boyfriend's grandmother pulled me aside and told embarrassing stories about him as a kid, treating me like I already belonged in their family history. His cousins asked about my major and my job and acted genuinely interested in my answers. Every person there made me feel welcomed and valued, like my presence mattered and my happiness was something worth celebrating. Halfway through the party, my boyfriend's father stood up and clinked his glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. The conversations died down and people turned toward him, and I felt my stomach tighten because I wasn't used to being the center of attention in good ways. He cleared his throat and looked directly at me with this expression that was so warm it made my chest hurt. He started talking about how proud he was to officially welcome me into their family, and his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. He said he'd watched me over the past few weeks and seen how strong and kind I was despite everything I'd been through. He called me his daughter, and tears started running down my face before I could stop them. These weren't the scared tears or angry tears I'd cried my whole life. These were different, lighter somehow, like something heavy was lifting off my shoulders. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered, and his wife came over to hug me while I tried to wipe my face. My boyfriend squeezed my hand and whispered that I deserved this, that I deserved to be loved without conditions. I looked around at all these people smiling at me with genuine happiness, not the cruel anticipation of a punchline, and something in my brain finally started to believe I might actually be worth something. We moved to the cake table after the toast, and someone handed me a knife to cut the first slice. My boyfriend stood next to me with his hand over mine on the knife handle, and we cut through the white frosting together. Everyone clapped and took photos, and I kept waiting for someone to shove my face into the cake or turn it into a joke. But nobody did. They just celebrated normally, like decent people who respected boundaries. We fed each other small bites of cake, and everyone cheered again, and it was so simple and kind that I felt tears threatening again. My boyfriend's grandmother came over and told me about their family tradition of keeping the top layer of the wedding cake for the first anniversary. She said it like my future with them was certain and planned for, like I was already part of their history. I watched people eating cake and laughing and including me in their conversations, and my brain kept trying to find the trick or the trap. But there wasn't one. This was just what normal families did. They celebrated without cruelty. They showed love without conditions. They included people without making them earn it through humiliation. I stood there holding my plate of cake and realized my entire childhood had been so twisted that basic human kindness felt shocking. Viviana found me near the dessert table and pulled me aside toward the back fence where it was quieter. She had this excited look on her face and told me she had good news. She'd spent the past week reporting all my family's harassment posts to the social media platforms for targeted harassment and cyberbullying. She showed me her phone where several of my parents' accounts had temporary suspensions for violating community guidelines. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. My brother's main account was suspended for 30 days. My father's account had a warning. She'd documented everything they posted about me and submitted it with explanations about the harassment campaign. I stared at her phone, feeling this weird sense of victory mixed with exhaustion. It wasn't going to stop them permanently, but it slowed them down. It made their attacks harder to spread. It showed that someone besides me thought their behavior was wrong. Viviana hugged me and said she wished she'd stood up for me back in high school when she first noticed how cruel my family was. I told her she was standing up for me now, and that mattered. We walked back to the party together, and I felt a little bit lighter knowing that my family's ability to attack me publicly had been reduced, even temporarily. Small victories still counted as victories. That night, after everyone left, I sat on my boyfriend's couch scrolling through photos from the party that people had posted online. My boyfriend was in the kitchen cleaning up, and I could hear him humming while he washed dishes. I looked at photo after photo of myself smiling. Not the fake smile I'd learned to perform for my family's cameras before they revealed the punchline. Real smiles. My eyes were bright and my shoulders were relaxed, and I looked genuinely happy in every single picture. My boyfriend came over and sat next to me, looking at the photos over my shoulder. He said he'd never seen me smile this much, and I realized he was right. I'd spent 18 years in survival mode, performing whatever role would get me through the day with minimal damage. I'd smiled when expected, but never from actual joy. I'd laughed at their pranks to avoid being called a bad sport. I'd pretended everything was fine to keep the peace. But today I'd smiled because I was actually happy, surrounded by people who wanted me to be happy. The difference was so obvious in the photos that it made me sad for the girl I used to be, the one who never got to experience joy without fear. My boyfriend kissed my forehead and said this was just the beginning, that I'd have thousands more days of real happiness. I leaned against him and kept scrolling through the photos, saving my favorites and feeling grateful that someone had documented proof of what genuine love looked like. The Monday after the party, I drove to the university I'd chosen and found the admissions office. The campus was bigger than I expected, with old brick buildings and students walking between classes looking stressed about finals. I checked in at the front desk and waited for my academic advisor appointment, feeling nervous about being treated like I was stupid or wasting everyone's time. The advisor called me back to her office and shook my hand with this firm, professional grip. She pulled up my file on her computer and immediately started talking about my valedictorian status with excitement. She said students like me were exactly who they wanted on campus, and she started pulling up course catalogs to plan my fall schedule. She asked what I wanted to study and listened to my answers without interrupting or mocking. She suggested challenging courses that would push me but not overwhelm me as a freshman. She talked about my intelligence like it was an asset instead of something to punish or hide. I signed up for biology, calculus, English composition, and psychology, feeling this growing excitement about actually learning without fear. She printed out my schedule and handed it to me with a smile, telling me she expected great things from me. I walked out of her office holding that paper like it was proof I deserved to be there, that my brain wasn't something to mock, but something to develop and celebrate. My phone buzzed that afternoon with a message from my younger sister. She'd found photos from the engagement party posted online by my boyfriend's family members. She said I looked peaceful and happy and she was glad I got out. Then she admitted something that made my stomach hurt. She was saving money secretly to leave when she turned 18. She had a notebook hidden in her room where she tracked every dollar from her part-time job. She was planning her escape the same way I'd planned mine. I sat in my car in the university parking lot reading her messages and feeling this complicated mix of pride and guilt. Pride that she was smart enough to plan ahead. Guilt that I'd left her behind to face our parents' cruelty alone. I messaged her back immediately, promising I'd help her when the time came. I told her to keep saving, to keep planning, to stay strong for one more year. I said I'd have a place for her to stay and resources to help her start over. I was throwing her a lifeline backward through time, giving her the support system I'd wished someone had given me. She sent back a heart emoji and told me she loved me, and I realized we were both survivors now, just at different stages of escape. I started attending a support group for people who'd gone no contact with abusive families on Thursday evenings at a community center downtown. The first meeting was terrifying because I had to admit out loud that my family was abusive, that I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic. There were 8 people in the circle, ranging from early 20s to late 50s. Everyone shared their stories and I heard patterns that matched my own experience. The love bombing followed by cruelty. The gaslighting that made us question our own memories. The public humiliation disguised as jokes. The family members who enabled the abuse by staying silent. When it was my turn, I talked about the Christmas incident and leaving home, and people nodded like they understood completely. A woman in her 40s told me she wished she'd left at 18 like I did, instead of wasting 20 more years trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. She said she'd finally cut contact at 38 and spent the past 5 years rebuilding her sense of self. Her words hit me hard because I realized I could have become her, stuck in that cycle for decades if I hadn't gotten out now. After the meeting, several people gave me their phone numbers and told me to call if I needed support. I drove home feeling less alone, understanding that my experience wasn't unique or my fault, that there were other people who'd survived similar families and built good lives anyway. My boyfriend and I spent Saturday apartment hunting for a place that would be ours together instead of just his. We looked at 5 different apartments near campus, and I surprised myself by having opinions about what I wanted. I wanted windows that let in natural light. I wanted a kitchen big enough to actually cook in. I wanted a second bedroom we could use as an office. My boyfriend listened to every preference and never made me feel demanding or difficult. We found a small 2-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from campus with big windows and updated appliances. The rent fit our budget if we both worked part-time jobs. I walked through the empty rooms and imagined our furniture and our life together, and it felt real and possible. We signed the lease that afternoon, and the apartment manager handed me a set of keys. I held those keys in my hand and felt like I was drawing a physical line between my old life and my new one. This was my space that my parents would never enter. This was my home that I chose with someone who loved me. This was proof that I'd survived and started building something better. Rainer sent an email Monday morning confirming he'd sent the first tuition payment directly to the university. I logged into my student account and saw the payment posted, covering my entire fall semester tuition and fees. The financial aid office sent a confirmation email saying everything was set, and I was cleared to start classes in August. I wrote Rainer a thank you message that was polite but had clear boundaries about contact frequency. I said I appreciated his support but needed space to heal, and I'd reach out when I was ready for more communication. He responded within an hour saying he understood and respected my boundaries, and he'd wait to hear from me on my timeline. The fact that he actually respected my boundaries without argument or guilt trips made me cautiously hopeful that maybe one biological family connection could be healthy. It was more respect than my parents had ever shown me in 18 years. I saved his email in a folder and felt grateful that at least one person from my blood family was trying to make amends in a genuine way. My mother made one final attempt to contact me through my university email address on Wednesday. The message was long and dramatic, claiming she'd changed and realized how wrong she'd been. She begged for another chance to prove she could be a better mother. She said she'd been thinking about everything I said and understood now how much she'd hurt me. The message was almost convincing until the last paragraph, where she mentioned how much she missed having me around for family events. Not how much she missed me as a person, but how much she missed my presence at their gatherings. I forwarded the entire email to my therapist without responding to my mother. We discussed it in our next session, and my therapist explained how abusers often escalate their tactics when old ones stop working. They cycle through anger, bargaining, and fake remorse, trying to find what will get their victim to come back. She said the fact that my mother contacted me through my university email after I'd blocked everything else showed she was escalating, not changing. Real change would mean respecting my boundaries and leaving me alone. I left that session feeling validated in my decision to maintain no contact, understanding that some people apologize not because they're sorry, but because they want access to keep hurting you. I logged into my university email settings the next morning and created filters blocking anyone not already in my contacts. Then I walked across campus to the security office, where a woman with kind eyes listened to my explanation about my family's harassment pattern. She typed notes into her computer while I talked, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, she pulled up my student account and added flags that would alert campus police if my parents or siblings showed up looking for me. She printed out a form for me to sign authorizing security to intervene if they appeared on campus, and I signed it feeling both protected and sad that I needed this level of protection from my own family. The security officer handed me her direct phone number and told me to call immediately if I spotted any of them near campus buildings. Walking back to the apartment, I felt lighter knowing the university took my safety seriously, instead of dismissing my concerns as family drama. Moving day arrived on a Saturday morning, and my boyfriend's family showed up at his old apartment at 8 with a rental truck and endless energy. His mother brought 3 bags of groceries and immediately started organizing our kitchen, while his father and uncle carried furniture down 3 flights of stairs. Callista helped me pack boxes in the bedroom, carefully wrapping dishes in newspaper and labeling everything with colored markers. His cousin brought a toolkit and spent 2 hours assembling our bed frame, while his aunt cleaned the bathroom in our new place before we even moved our stuff in. I stood in the middle of the chaos watching everyone work together without complaining or expecting thanks, and something clicked in my brain about what family actually meant. These people showed up on their day off to carry heavy boxes upstairs because they wanted to help us start our life together. Nobody made jokes about how I should be grateful. Nobody turned the move into a prank or opportunity for humiliation. His mother stocked our pantry with basic supplies and refused to let me pay her back, saying that's what mothers do for their daughters. By late afternoon, our new apartment had furniture in every room and food in the fridge, and I sat on our couch surrounded by people who chose to love me without conditions. Our first night in the apartment felt surreal after everyone left, and we were alone with our belongings scattered everywhere. We ordered pizza because neither of us had energy to cook, and we sat on the living room floor eating straight from the box because our dining table wasn't fully assembled yet. The apartment was quiet, except for traffic sounds from the street below, and I kept looking around at our space like I might wake up and find myself back in my childhood bedroom. My boyfriend caught me staring at the walls and asked what I was thinking, and I told him I was scared this would all disappear, that I'd wake up and discover the past month was just a dream my brain invented to cope with Christmas. He put down his pizza slice and took both my hands, looking directly at me with that serious expression he gets when he needs me to really hear him. He said this was real and permanent, that we signed a lease together and his whole family witnessed us building this life, that I wasn't going to wake up back in that house ever again. I cried into his shoulder while he held me on our unfinished living room floor, and eventually the tears stopped and I believed him. I started my summer job at the coffee shop the following Monday, arriving 30 minutes early because I was nervous about messing up. My manager was a grad student named Sarah who trained me on the espresso machine with endless patience, showing me how to steam milk 3 times until I got it right. My coworkers were all college students who complained cheerfully about their parents while we worked through the lunch rush. One girl griped about her mom texting her every hour asking about her location. Another guy rolled his eyes talking about his dad's curfew rules even though he was 20 years old. I listened to them vent about these minor annoyances and realized how completely different my situation had been. Their parents were overprotective and annoying, but they still had parents who cared where they were and wanted them home safe. My parents had cared more about setting up the perfect humiliation than about whether I felt loved or valued. During my break, I sat in the back room eating a sandwich and understood for the first time how extreme my family's treatment actually was. Normal families had boundaries that felt annoying. My family had cruelty disguised as entertainment. My therapy session that Wednesday focused on memories from before Christmas, and my therapist asked me to describe other times my parents had pranked me. I talked about my 13th birthday when they wrapped empty boxes and filmed my disappointment, about the time they told me I got into my dream summer program, then revealed it was fake, about countless small moments where they chose mockery over support. She listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, and when I finished, she explained that what I experienced wasn't normal teasing, but prolonged emotional abuse designed to keep me insecure and dependent. She introduced breathing techniques for managing my constant hypervigilance, that feeling of waiting for the next attack that made my shoulders tight and my stomach hurt. She said my trust issues and anxiety were normal responses to growing up in an environment where love was always conditional on accepting humiliation. We practiced grounding exercises where I focused on physical sensations in the present moment instead of scanning for threats. By the end of the session, I understood that healing would take years of work, but at least now I had tools to start processing the damage. Callista invited me to hang out with her friend group on Friday night, and I almost said no because meeting new people made me anxious. But I forced myself to go, and we met at a restaurant downtown where 4 of her friends were already seated in a booth. They welcomed me warmly, sliding over to make room, and nobody asked invasive questions about why I was living with my boyfriend at 18 or where my parents were. We talked about movies and music and complained about summer jobs, and I laughed at their stories without waiting for someone to turn my happiness into a punchline. One girl invited us all to see a concert next month and included me automatically in the group text. Another guy recommended a book series and promised to lend me the first one. We went to a late movie after dinner, and I sat between Callista and her friend Eva, eating popcorn and feeling normal for the first time in months. Walking back to the parking lot afterward, Callista linked her arm through mine and said she was glad I came out, that her friends really liked me. I realized I was learning how to have fun without constantly bracing for punishment. My brother's harassment stopped completely after his 3rd police warning, and Stanislav explained over coffee that the documentation we'd built meant any further contact could result in actual criminal charges. He showed me the file he'd compiled with dates and descriptions of every incident, photographs of my brother confronting my boyfriend at work, copies of threatening social media messages, and the police reports from his apartment building visits. He said this evidence proved a pattern of escalating behavior that courts took seriously, and one more incident would likely result in my brother getting arrested. The silence from my biological family felt strange at first, like waiting for a storm that never arrived. I kept checking my phone expecting angry messages or seeing my brother's car following us. But days passed with nothing, then a week, then 2 weeks, and gradually the knot in my stomach started loosening. The silence shifted from feeling like the calm before disaster to feeling like actual peace, like maybe I'd finally convinced them I was serious about cutting contact. My class schedule for fall semester arrived by email in early July, and I logged into the student portal to see my courses listed in neat rows. I'd registered for Introduction to Psychology, English Composition, College Algebra, Biology with Lab, and a freshman seminar on family systems. Buying my textbooks with money I'd earned myself felt powerful in a way I hadn't expected, like I was investing in my own future instead of depending on people who might use their support as leverage. My boyfriend came with me to the campus bookstore and took photos of me surrounded by stacks of textbooks, looking genuinely excited instead of anxious about starting college. I posted one photo online with a caption about new beginnings and fresh starts, and the comments filled with encouragement from his family and my coworkers. My mother's fake account tried to comment something negative, but I'd blocked it before she could finish typing. Looking at my textbooks stacked on our coffee table, I felt proud of myself for the first time in months. Viviana and I met for coffee the next week at a shop near campus, and she apologized immediately for not speaking up during high school when she noticed how my family treated me. She said she'd seen my mother mock me at the school events and heard my siblings make cruel jokes about me, but she'd been too scared to say anything because she didn't want to make things worse. I told her she was just a kid too, and not responsible for protecting me from my parents, that I didn't blame her for not knowing how to help. We talked for 2 hours about high school memories and what we'd both been doing since graduation, and forgiving her felt easier than I expected. Letting go of resentment toward Viviana helped me understand something important about responsibility and blame. I wasn't responsible for fixing my family's dysfunction or making them treat me better. Their choices were theirs, and my only job was protecting myself and building a better life. Viviana promised to stay in touch and invited me to her birthday party next month, and I said yes without the usual fear that accepting invitations meant setting myself up for disappointment. My younger sister's birthday message arrived late one night asking specific questions about how I'd planned my escape. She wanted to know how I'd saved money without our parents noticing, where I'd hidden important documents, how I'd known when it was safe to leave. Reading her questions, I realized she was 17 now and building her own exit strategy for next year. I video called her from our bedroom while my boyfriend gave us privacy, and I walked her through everything step by step. I told her to open a bank account at a different bank than our parents used, to keep the statements going to a friend's address, to photograph all her important documents and store copies in the cloud. I explained how I'd slowly moved essential belongings to my boyfriend's place over several weeks, so my parents wouldn't notice everything disappearing at once. She took notes on her phone while I talked, and I saw my own desperation reflected in her face. I promised to help her when she turned 18, that she could stay with us if she needed to, that she wouldn't have to face this alone like I did. Becoming the older sibling I'd needed but never had felt like turning my pain into something useful. Like maybe surviving my family's cruelty meant I could help her survive too. I'd helped my younger sister plan her escape, becoming the older sibling I'd needed but never had, and that act of protection helped me understand that surviving my family's cruelty meant I could help her survive too. The university sent an email about freshman orientation 3 weeks before classes started, and I registered immediately, putting my boyfriend's name down as my guest since he'd be starting graduate classes at the same school. Walking onto campus felt different from I'd expected. Not scary, but exciting. Like I was finally allowed to want things for myself without waiting for punishment. My boyfriend held my hand as we toured the student center and library, stopping to take photos in front of the big fountain where students threw pennies and made wishes. I threw one in and wished for the courage to keep moving forward instead of backward, and when I told him what I'd wished for, he kissed my forehead and said I already had that courage. The orientation leader showed us the psychology building where most of my classes would be, and I felt this weird pride looking at the classrooms and thinking about studying there. My therapist had asked during our last session how I felt about starting college, and I'd admitted I felt excited instead of terrified, which she said was a significant marker of healing progress. The feeling stayed with me all day during orientation, this sense that my future belonged to me now instead of being something my family could take away as a joke. We grabbed lunch at the campus cafeteria, and I tried not to think about how my parents had promised to help with college costs before Christmas, how that promise had been just another setup for disappointment. My boyfriend's parents had offered to cover my meal plan as an early wedding gift, and I'd accepted without the usual panic that accepting help meant owing someone my dignity. After orientation ended, we walked back to our apartment, and I felt tired but good, like I'd accomplished something real just by showing up and believing I deserved to be there. That night, I opened my laptop and started writing a letter to my younger sister, typing out everything I wished someone had told me about healing from family trauma. I explained how the guilt would try to convince her she was wrong for leaving, how our parents would use every manipulation tactic to make her doubt herself, how the freedom would feel scary at first because she'd spent 17 years learning that safety meant staying small and quiet. I wrote about therapy and how finding the right counselor took time, about setting boundaries and how people who loved you would respect them instead of treating them like challenges to overcome. The letter grew longer as I kept typing, paragraphs about anger being healthy and protective instead of something shameful, about how she didn't owe our parents forgiveness or reconciliation just because they were family. I saved it in a folder labeled for sister, without sending it yet, wanting to give her the roadmap I'd had to draw myself in the dark, but knowing she needed to be ready to receive it. Writing everything down helped me see how far I'd come since Christmas, how I'd gone from completely broken to building an actual life, and I hoped reading it someday would help her believe escape was possible. My boyfriend found me crying at the laptop and sat down next to me, reading over my shoulder until he understood what I was writing. He wrapped his arms around me, and we sat there quietly for a while before he said something that surprised me. He suggested we set a wedding date for next summer after my freshman year, giving us time to save money and plan properly instead of rushing because we were scared or desperate. The idea of planning something that far ahead felt strange, like I was allowed to assume good things would still be happening to me a year from now. His parents had already offered to help with wedding costs, and this time I said yes without the defensive panic that usually came with accepting support. My therapist had been working with me on understanding that accepting love and support didn't make me weak or indebted, that healthy relationships involved mutual care instead of one person always owing the other. We spent the rest of the evening looking at wedding venues online, nothing fancy but places that felt like us, and I realized I was planning a future instead of just surviving the present. The shift felt huge even though it was just looking at pictures of gardens and small reception halls because I was choosing what I wanted instead of preparing for what would be taken away. My manager at the coffee shop pulled me aside during my shift the next week to tell me I'd completed my summer job training successfully. She said I was promoted to shift supervisor because I was a natural leader who made customers feel welcomed, and the compliment hit me so hard I had to excuse myself to cry in the back room. I'd spent 18 years being told I was stupid and worthless, that my accomplishments were jokes, and my efforts were things to mock, and hearing genuine praise felt almost painful because I didn't know how to process it. My coworker found me and asked if I was okay, and I tried explaining that I wasn't used to praise. That wasn't followed by a punchline or humiliation. She hugged me and said I deserved every good thing that happened to me, that she'd noticed how hard I worked and how kind I was to difficult customers, and her words made me cry harder because they were true instead of traps. The promotion came with a small raise that would help with wedding savings, but more than that, it proved I could succeed when people weren't actively sabotaging me. I went home that night and told my boyfriend about the promotion, and he celebrated like I'd won a major award instead of just getting a shift supervisor position at a coffee shop. His genuine excitement reminded me that normal families celebrated each other's wins instead of turning them into competitions or jokes. My therapy session that week brought a breakthrough I hadn't expected when my therapist asked how I felt about my family now. I'd been saying I felt hurt and sad, using the safe emotions that made me seem like a good person, but she pushed me to go deeper. Finally, I admitted I was angry at them, furious actually, and saying it out loud felt like breaking a rule I'd followed my whole life. She helped me understand that anger was healthy and protective, that being mad at people who hurt you wasn't the same as being a bad person, and we practiced expressing anger in safe ways. I yelled into a pillow about the Christmas incident, about every prank and humiliation and moment they'd made me feel worthless, and afterward I felt lighter instead of guilty. My therapist explained that I'd been taught to suppress anger because angry people fought back, and my family needed me compliant and easy to hurt. Learning to access my anger meant I was starting to feel less like a victim, and more like a survivor who fought back, and that shift changed something fundamental in how I saw myself. Walking out of that session, I felt taller somehow, like I'd reclaimed space I'd been taught to give away. Rainer called me a few days later asking if he could attend some of my university events, specifically the freshman orientation ceremony in August. I almost said no automatically, but something made me pause and consider whether having one biological family connection might be healthy if the boundaries were clear. I agreed to let him come with explicit rules about behavior and emotional expectations, explaining that I wasn't ready for deep family reconciliation, but I could handle his presence at public events. He accepted the boundaries without argument or guilt trips, promising to show up on time and behave respectfully, and I felt cautiously optimistic about having one biological family member who might actually respect my needs. The orientation ceremony arrived 2 weeks later, and Rainer showed up exactly when he said he would, sitting quietly in the audience and clapping when my name was called. He didn't try to force hugs or emotional conversations afterward, just congratulated me simply, and asked if he could take one photo together. His restraint felt genuine instead of manipulative, like he understood he'd lost the right to unlimited access, and was grateful for whatever connection I'd allow. We took the photo and he left without drama, and I realized having him there hadn't ruined anything, which made me think maybe some family relationships could be salvaged if people were willing to do the actual work of respecting boundaries. I joined a campus club for first-generation college students during the first week of classes, looking for people who might understand what it meant to overcome family obstacles to pursue education. The first meeting had about 20 students, and we went around sharing why we'd joined, and when my turn came, I gave the basic version of my story about leaving an abusive family situation to start college. Several people nodded like they recognized parts of their own experiences in mine, and after the meeting, 3 different students came up to tell me my story inspired them to set firmer boundaries with their own difficult families. One girl said she'd been feeling guilty about limiting contact with her mother, but hearing me talk about choosing my own well-being helped her see that protecting yourself wasn't selfish. Sharing my story in that safe space helped me realize how far I'd come since Christmas, how I'd gone from completely shattered to functioning well enough to inspire others. The club became a weekly anchor where I could be honest about the hard parts of healing without judgment, and making friends who understood family trauma meant I didn't have to explain why certain things triggered me or why I flinched at unexpected kindness. My boyfriend suggested we start premarital counseling even though we weren't getting married for another year, saying he wanted to build healthy communication patterns from the start. I agreed immediately because I knew my family had taught me terrible relationship habits, and I didn't want to bring that damage into our marriage. The counselor we found specialized in helping couples build strong foundations, and our first session focused on communication styles and conflict resolution. She praised our emotional honesty with each other, saying we were doing the hard work that many couples avoided until problems became crises, and her validation made me feel proud instead of broken. We practiced having difficult conversations about money and family and future plans, learning how to disagree without attacking each other or shutting down. The counselor pointed out that I had a tendency to apologize for having needs or opinions, a habit left over from my family punishing me for taking up space. Working on that pattern with my boyfriend felt safe because he never used my vulnerabilities against me, never turned my admissions into weapons the way my family had. Each session taught us something new about building a partnership instead of just surviving together, and I started believing we could actually have a healthy marriage instead of just escaping into a less painful situation. I declared my major in psychology with a focus on family systems during my academic advising appointment, wanting to understand the dynamics that had damaged me and maybe help others escape similar situations. My academic advisor listened to my reasons for choosing this path and said my personal experience would make me an empathetic and effective counselor someday, turning my pain into purpose. She helped me map out the required courses and suggested I consider research opportunities studying family trauma and resilience, and talking about my future career made it feel real instead of just a fantasy. I'd spent so long believing I was stupid and incapable because my family had mocked every achievement. But sitting in that advising office planning my psychology degree proved they'd been wrong about me. The advisor mentioned that many students who'd experienced family trauma went into helping professions, that surviving difficult childhoods often created people who understood suffering and wanted to prevent it in others. Choosing this major felt like taking ownership of my story instead of just being a victim of it, like I was deciding that everything I'd survived would mean something beyond just my own pain. Fall semester started and I threw myself into my classes with an intensity that surprised me, discovering I was actually brilliant when I wasn't being sabotaged and mocked. My introduction to psychology professor praised my essay on family systems theory, saying I had an intuitive understanding of complex dynamics that usually took students years to develop. I made the dean's list my first semester with a grade average that would have made my parents proud if they'd been capable of pride instead of jealousy. My boyfriend's family celebrated like it was a major holiday when I showed them my grades, his mother baking a special cake and his father giving a toast about my accomplishments. They threw a small dinner party to honor my academic success, inviting extended family who congratulated me without any jokes or pranks or suggestions that I didn't really deserve it. Sitting at that table surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated my achievements instead of punishing them, I finally understood what family was supposed to be. The contrast between this celebration and how my biological family had treated my valedictorian status made me angry all over again, but this time the anger felt clean and justified instead of shameful. I'd proven that I could thrive when people stopped actively trying to break me down, and my success felt like the best possible revenge against everyone who told me I was worthless. My younger sister's message came through at 11:47 p.m. on her 18th birthday. 3 words that made my hands shake. I'm leaving tonight. I called her immediately and walked her through everything while my boyfriend grabbed his keys and headed for the door. I told her to pack only what she could carry in one backpack, to grab her documents if she could find them, to leave her phone behind if our parents paid for it because they could track it. She whispered answers between shaky breaths, and I heard our mother's voice in the background asking who she was talking to, heard my sister lie smoothly about a friend calling to wish her happy birthday. My boyfriend texted me updates as he drove, and I stayed on the phone with my sister, keeping her calm while she waited in her room with the lights off and her backpack ready. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours before my boyfriend texted that he was parked 2 houses down, and I told my sister to go now, right now, don't look back. She hung up and I sat on our couch staring at my phone screen, remembering the terror of my own escape, praying she'd make it out before anyone stopped her. 15 minutes passed before my boyfriend called to say she was in the car, and they were driving away, and I started crying with relief I hadn't known I was holding in. They arrived at our apartment 40 minutes later, and when my sister walked through the door with her single backpack, and eyes full of fear, I pulled her into the tightest hug and promised her she was safe now, that we both survived, and she would too. She broke down sobbing against my shoulder, and I held her while she shook, thinking about how I'd wished someone had been there to catch me when I fell. We spent the next morning helping my sister enroll in community college for the spring semester, filling out paperwork in the admissions office while she kept glancing at the door like our parents might burst through it. The admissions counselor was patient and kind, explaining financial aid options and helping my sister pick classes that would transfer to a 4-year school later. I got her a job application at my coffee shop that same afternoon, and my manager hired her on the spot after I vouched for her work ethic. My sister slept on our couch for 3 months while saving money from her paychecks, and watching her slowly relax into safety felt like watching myself heal all over again. She stopped flinching when doors opened unexpectedly, started laughing at jokes without checking if anyone was mocking her, began making plans for her future instead of just surviving each day. Having her in our apartment made the space feel like the family home I'd always wanted but never had, where people supported each other instead of tearing each other down for entertainment. She'd wake up some mornings looking confused about where she was, Then remember she was safe and smile with this relief that made my chest ache. We'd have breakfast together before our shifts at the coffee shop, talking about her classes and my wedding plans and all the normal things sisters should get to discuss. My boyfriend never complained about the cramped space or the extra person, just welcomed her like she'd always been part of our household. My parents made one final public post 3 weeks after my sister left, claiming both their daughters had abandoned them and playing the victim card for maximum sympathy. They wrote this long, dramatic story about how they'd sacrificed everything for their ungrateful children, how they'd tried so hard to make family traditions fun and memorable, how they couldn't understand why we'd turned our backs on them. The post got shared by a few of their friends at first, people offering sympathy and calling us selfish. But then the comments shifted as people who actually knew our family started speaking up, pointing out the pattern of cruel behavior they'd witnessed over the years, mentioning specific incidents where our parents had humiliated us publicly. Someone from my high school wrote about how they'd watched my mother mock my valedictorian speech at graduation, making jokes about how I'd probably plagiarized it. A neighbor mentioned seeing my father laugh while my brother cried after another prank gone wrong. The supportive comments for my parents got buried under people calling out their toxic behavior, and Viviana screenshot the whole thread and sent it to me with a message saying the truth was finally louder than their lies. I read through every comment with my sister sitting beside me, both of us crying as we realized public opinion had shifted because people were finally seeing what we'd lived through for years. My parents deleted the post 6 hours after putting it up, but the screenshots lived forever, proof that their version of events wasn't fooling anyone anymore. A year after that terrible Christmas, I'm planning my wedding with my chosen family while helping my sister build her independent life and starting my sophomore year with a strong grade average and clear career goals. My sister moved into her own studio apartment last month, decorating it with furniture from thrift stores and plants she's learning to keep alive, visiting us twice a week for dinner and game nights. She's dating someone from her college classes who treats her with respect and patience, and watching her experience healthy love makes me grateful we both escaped before the damage became permanent. I'm taking upper-level psychology courses now, learning about family systems and trauma responses and all the theories that explain why our parents behaved the way they did, turning my pain into knowledge that might help other people someday. My boyfriend's mother asks me yesterday what I want for Christmas this year, and I tell her I already have everything I needed. A family who loves me without conditions and the freedom to become who I was always meant to be. Well, that's another emotional roller coaster that probably didn't need to happen. If you're still here, I'm both impressed and a little worried. Go ahead and subscribe, you've already proven your dedication.